You're listening to the 10-2 Blue Brief, a podcast by the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association. Hi, this is Chuck Dowd, retired Assistant Chief from the New York City Police Department. Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of the nationwide public safety network, FirstNet. And it's important to all of public safety, but this is more of a conversation about how it affects law enforcement. And our guest today is Sheriff Mark Lamb. Many of you probably know him. He's kind of a famous guy. You've seen him probably on TV, on Fox News and other places, right?
Especially lately.
and then
especially this last week or two.
Yeah. And then we're going to be talking again. I did 35-year career at the NYPD. My last 12 years was running all things communications for the NYPD and the New York City 911 system, and was on the board of directors of FirstNet for the first 2 years. So with that, let me turn it over to Mark to introduce himself. Mark, please go ahead.
Well, Chuck, thanks for having me on. It's an honor. Just all the work that you've done for this profession, I appreciate it. It's great to be on with you. I know we're talking about some important topics today, with technology, with where communication is in law enforcement. So I'm honored to be part of this conversation. For those of you who don't know me, I am a retired Sheriff Mark Lamb. I was the sheriff of Pinal County, Arizona. So there's only 15 counties in Arizona. We were the county between Phoenix and Tucson, third largest county. We had 600 employees, population of 500,000. Our county, for anybody on the East Coast, was the size of the state of Connecticut, 5,400 square miles. And we had a big job. So I was grateful to be the sheriff there. I'm a huge supporter of the profession and making sure that we're always at the cutting edge of where we need to be in this profession and making sure that we keep people safe. And so I'm a big supporter of what you're doing here, Chuck, and the work that you guys have done in the past. And I'm excited to talk about it today.
Well, that's great. And I know you're a big supporter of FirstNet. I've heard you speak about it before, Mark. So, so let's talk about that. And a lot of folks don't know the history of FirstNet. So real quick, FirstNet, gets referred to very often as a federal project. And while it was federal legislation, it was not truly a federal project. It wasn't Congress that came up with this. It was us. It was your guys. It was our guys. State and local needed a new tool for first response. And what we realized was after the September 11th attacks, and also in the digital age, that we needed far more capability to deliver information to our first responders than we were doing, 20 years ago with two-way radio. It's just they weren't getting what they needed.
Well, and Chuck, to your point, a lot of people don't understand even how cell towers work. They pick up their phone, they don't think twice about where that phone call goes, how it connects with another phone. And they don't understand the bandwidth. They don't understand what the capability is of a cell tower or data or spectrum. There's a lot that most people just don't get. And all of that matters when you're trying to get up on a communication platform. All of that matters, whether it's our police radios or whether it's a cell phone, and time matters in these situations. So I just wanted to interject that most people don't understand. They just think there's just this huge bandwidth of anytime I make a call, it should work. And the reality is, depending on the situation or the crisis or the emergency, they may not be the case.
And to your point, Mark, one of the things we needed when we created FirstNet was priority, absolute priority for public safety. We needed to be, in effect, at the top of the food chain, right, when it came to use of that network, so that we knew our information and our data always got through. Because when time's a factor and you're looking to save lives, that's got to happen, Mark. True? Yeah, right?
That's right. Yeah, and look, the data piece of it, we've got our radios, we've got our cell phones, but then we have these little data cards that are running off of a Wi-Fi or off of a cell tower or a cell service. In this case, we switched over to FirstNet, AT&T FirstNet, for our in-car data and at the same time our phones. And so when we talk about the data piece, most people don't realize that computer in the car of the police officer is working off of a cell phone signal and off of cell data with the card. And we're also sending that information. the ability for the police officer or a deputy to be able to ensure their safety, who they're dealing with, they need to get real-time results back. So that matters.
Absolutely. And again, it becomes almost like a partner in the car for that officer or that deputy, right? It's supplying information through analytics that's relevant to what they need for that emergency that they're responding to, right? I always like to tell the story. You may have heard me tell it in the past when I do presentations. I talk about the one incident that really triggered our thinking about how to do this in first response was the death of police officer Alan Scheiberger in the NYPD in Brooklyn, all the way back in 2011. And he responded on what was considered a routine, although we know nothing's ever really routine domestic violence incident. At 4 a.m, he, his partner, a sergeant, and another officer, 4 of them, responded, and they had to arrest the guy who had beaten up his girlfriend in this apartment. And as they exited the building, the guy had offered no physical resistance. He'd been passive. He suddenly shoved Alan off the stoop in Brooklyn. And like many places in Brooklyn, it had a drop off to a basement area. Alan fell down there. Tragically, his neck was broken and he was killed. Right. And what was frustrating about it for us was the fact that Alan and the other 3 did not know who this guy was. In fact, he had been arrested multiple times at an apartment for domestic violence, had resisted before, and he had a history of 26 arrests. And you know, Mark, no matter where you are, whether you're in Arizona or New York City, when you know a guy's got 26 arrests, we're handling him differently, correct?
That's right. And look, it's changed a lot, in the last 20 years. When I first started in this career, there was no computer in the car. You basically called over the radio, and whatever dispatch, whatever information they gave you, however timely it was, it came from them. And then even to know where you needed to go, you had to memorize the map books. And then it slowly progressed. This is where we're a little different in the West because we cover so much area. We all have police vehicles in the streets of New York or maybe in some of the other bigger cities. They may not have access to a computer while they're out there patrolling a neighborhood. Fortunately, we do. So as we started to see this computer come about, not only was it giving us more real-time information, it also reduced the drag on dispatch. Remember, without these computers in the cars, the officers and the deputies were having to call in every bit of information into it.
Yeah.
And part of it is exactly what you talked about. We're showing up to houses. We had no idea that a guy had been arrested 20 times and was very violent. That computer started to change the way things were. But now you have an issue of how do we have the data to be able to do it, the bandwidth to be able to process all this information that is now going on outside of the radio system that we are known for in police.
Right. And it's interesting. I didn't know the physical area that you talked about, and it's startling for me coming from New York City to hear that your response area was the size of the state of Connecticut. Right. In New York City,
Wow.
We knew if we had an emergency, help was no more than 3 or 4 minutes away, tops, usually 2 minutes if we called on the radio. For your guys, it's a completely different kettle of fish, right? So how does FirstNet change that for them? Become almost like a digital partner, not a physical, but a digital partner in the patrol car when they're responding.
Well, first of all, now you've got this ability to tag where your guys are at, the computer in the car. Now dispatch can actually see where a deputy may be, even if he's outside of his car and his radio's not working. We have a ton of mountains in our county, so we have a part of our county where we struggled to get good radio service. We have since changed that. It's much better now, but I think we still had 3% of our county that did not have good radio service or no radio service at all. To share a story, much like your Allen one, which tragically, and my heart goes out to his family, we had a deputy that responded to a call. This was a habitual offender kind of guy. They knew that, thankfully, because of the computers in the car. So he shows up, and the guy's being agitated, and he's standing next to all these tools, screwdrivers and all of that. And luckily, this deputy is very calm and cool, collective deputy, and he's talking to the guy, kind of waiting for some backup to show up. He's in the middle of nowhere. Backup's probably at least 15 to 20 minutes away in a situation like this. And so he's stalling for time, trying to talk the guy down. Hey, put the tools down. Finally, all of a sudden, this guy just takes off. And so the deputy gets into pursuit. It's at night. He's running after him. It's a foot pursuit. And this guy pulls a gun out of his waistband, turns around, and boom. And the criminals are always the luckiest.
Yeah.
And this bullet comes and hits him right just below, right at the top of his leg, in the inside of his leg, and clips his femoral artery.
Mm-hmm.
And so the deputy goes down, but not before he returned fire and put the guy down. And so now you've got these two guys. You got a suspect laying in the desert, and you got this guy laying in the desert. How far did they run? Where's the car? And now the ability to be able to communicate via our radio or cell phone, or have good information coming out to the responding deputies that are coming in now, or getting the medevac services that we need, because we got to get a helicopter in there. So this guy manages to put a tourniquet on his own leg, good enough to where it's stopping the bleeding, but he's not in good shape. We get another deputy shows up. He then takes that one off, puts another tourniquet on. The suspect, we didn't kill him. He got hit and fell down, and we ended up finding him. And our deputy, we get the helicopter to come in. But these are all resources that, had we not had a good communication system, computers in our cars, good radio system, cell phones, all of this mattered. Time matters in these situations. Seconds matter, minutes matter. And in this particular case, we were able to get him to a hospital. We were actually able to not only save his life, but we were able to save his leg. And he eventually came back to work probably less than a year later. And now, just my understanding is he just got on SWAT. That changed that guy's career. It saved his life. A family now still has their dad, their husband, and all that goes back to the ability to communicate and have the right information available.
And just juxtapose that against the Alan Scheiberger situation, right? Where they should have had that mission. They should have known who that guy was. They should have known about his 28 arrests, and they didn't. And there was no reason why they shouldn't have known it. You know it, I know it, and we handle that situation, as well as I do. We handle that differently if we know somebody's got 28 arrests, as opposed to it being his first time, right? So those are two different things. Yep. So I just wanted to talk a little bit now, if we could just change gears a little bit. Let's talk about FirstNet and its importance to public safety. I was involved with a group of guys early on, that, in the effort to get the federal legislation passed to create the nationwide network. We were successful in getting legislation passed in 2012, February, coming up on the anniversary of it. And, its importance to the nation, and one of the things we talked about when we did this, because we had more technical help, this kind of started in the big cities, right? The thought process for this, right? But when we talked about it, one of the things we said, especially coming from the NYPD, I knew that people would be sensitive to, well, does this work for the rural guy, right? How does this help in your area, right? Is this going to be a game changer? If it doesn't work for everybody in law enforcement, then it simply doesn't work. So could you touch on that a little bit, Mark?
Yeah, look, just because we're not in the city doesn't mean we don't have events that may require us having a priority in a situation like this. Anytime you have a disaster, we've seen in the last several years disasters throughout this country where, if law enforcement or first responders do not have priority on those cell towers for data in their cars or cell phones that are being used, it can cost lives. We do a big thing called Country Thunder, where we will have, for a week at a time, we'll have 50, 60,000 people at a concert, 30,000+ people living there. Well, guess what? They're all using their cell phones. They're all using their internet, and all of that is pulling off of one cell tower. And when we have these concerts, our ability to protect people at night is our being pushed as the primary when we have FirstNet. And what we did was we switched over. We went with FirstNet. And anytime there were people say, well, my phone doesn't work out here, but ours did. And our ability to communicate was a game changer, was critical.
And that absolute priority that you get on FirstNet, which is automatic, it happens. There's nothing you have to do. It's not like wireless priority service, which is a different methodology, right? Which I find in most cases doesn't work, right? But the prioritization on FirstNet works seamlessly. And to your point, and Times Square, we get 1 million people in Times Square, right? For the New Year's Eve ball drop. And for the last several years, NYPD patrol and uniformed personnel have been on FirstNet, and they have never had a problem receiving or sending information inside that crowd. It's as if that crowd isn't even there.
And if go to next time, anybody listening, go the next time you're at a big event, a football game, a basketball game, where there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in the same area, and tell me how well your cell phone works. How well you can get data off the internet in those venues. What FirstNet allows us to do as first responders is to be able to get to that data regardless of the amount of people there. And so it's been a game changer in law enforcement. It's been a game changer for first responders who are responding to critical or making sure that we're keeping people safe. And I know that a lot of people may not understand why it had to go federal. Well, that's the way that we get everybody in. One thing in law enforcement, and most people don't realize this, is that our systems don't all interlink. We don't all share data. It's getting better, and there's becoming more and more companies that are helping do that. So the only way to do that on a national level is to be able to go through the federal piece of it. I usually say, if you want a problem, put it through the federal government. They'll make it a problem. And when they try to fix a problem, they make it worse. In this particular case, because you guys, the way you ran it, where it was actual first responders setting up this authority with the approval of the federal government, but the federal government's not running it, I think that has been what has been successful about FirstNet Authority, is the ability to be autonomous, run by first responders, run by public safety people, and that has been able to keep the FirstNet Authority effective. And it doesn't cost the taxpayer any money. Yeah. That's been, another upside to it. And so now, I know that we're going to talk about this, but now it's sunsetting, so it's coming to it was a 10-year, I think.
It was 15 years, Mark.
15 years.
Yep.
So 15 years to stand it up and to show how it works. And I think that I'm running for Congress. For anybody out there, I'm running for the U.S. Congress here in Arizona. Our congressman is running for governor. And if you want to go check out my website, it's marklamb.us. But this is one of the issues that I find very important. And it may be resolved before I get there, but if not, I hope to be part of this next year in the legislative cycle. I want to make sure that we keep FirstNet Authority so that we can continue to have priority service, priority communications, data, all of that for our first responders, law enforcement, fire. We need to be able to have this, and I don't think it needs to be changed.
Let me stop you there for a second and just talk about that, because that's an important point, right? So I was one of the guys that helped write the legislation back in 2012. We were consulted on it. And one of the things that we pointed out was that even though this was federal legislation, we needed state and local first responder control of this, right? So this was designed, and it, now it resides in the U.S. Department of Commerce, NTIA, but and the legislation specifically refers to it as an independent authority. We want to see words like that, independent, stay in this legislation. And so they built in a checkpoint at 15 years, right, which is February 27, where it has to be reauthorized, right? And we want it a clean reauthorization. We don't want a lot of changes in the legislation. And there were some out there that, and the reason they had the checkpoint, quite frankly, was they weren't sure if this was going to work. They weren't sure if it was going to be a success. And if it hadn't been built, or no one used it, right, then Congress could take the spectrum back. And that was the goal of that checkpoint, right? Well, it's been a tremendous success. There's 30,000 plus agencies on. It's over 7.5 million public safety connections. So clearly it's been a success. And as you pointed out, it self-funds. Money has to be paid by the contractor back to the FirstNet Authority in the department, the independent authority in commerce, to expand the network. And the other thing that got built into the legislation was that the money that comes back from the contractee, which is AT&T, right? AT&T built FirstNet, right? All of that money has to go back into the network, and it has to go back in for public safety expansion of the network. Why? Why did we want that exclusively for the use of public safety? Because in our experience in public safety, and I'm sure you've experienced this in Arizona too, many times you'll have a state surcharge on telephones or whatever for 911. All right. So I ran the 911 system for 12 years in New York City. Right. And guess how much of that money I used to see for 911? Right. And I'm sure you've seen in Arizona, it gets diverted someplace else. So we want to be careful here and keep the legislation as clean as possible. If one of the things that Congress is saying is we want to see more oversight. I think public safety is perfectly comfortable with more oversight. But could you talk to those 2 points? Keeping the money focused on FirstNet, on expanding the network, and the fact that public safety has no problem with oversight, and they want additional oversight. Can you talk about those 2 things for me?
Yeah, look, the government wants oversight. What that equates to them is their ability to set regulations and fees and taxes and all that junk. So I don't love when government says they would want more oversight. I'm okay, like you. I think that there's some things.
If they want to be able to review things, look at the coverage, we have no problem with that, right?
And that's what I was going to say.
But
the 15
stealing
years.
the money, I shouldn't say steal. Diverting the money elsewhere. Let me be polite, right? Is not what we want to see. Correct?
No. And you've seen it, Chuck. You've been in this. We see it firsthand in our professions. Government is not the solution to it. I love that this was an independent authority that was over it. Now, I'm like you. I don't care if they put in a few, provisions here, but I would love to see it stay as an independent authority, not cost the taxpayers any money, keep the politicians out of it as much as possible, so that this remains a really kind of a unaltered tool for law enforcement and first responders. I think that is important. And I hope that as they review this, that's what they see. I was there just last week. I was with sheriffs on the National Sheriff's Association conference, then on to the Major County Sheriff's Association conference. Because I'm running for Congress, I was in several meetings with some very key congressional members. And I actually talked about the importance of FirstNet authority and how important it was in law enforcement for us to be able to renew this and keep it clean, pass it through, and let's keep it the way we're going. But like you, I get it. This is what the 15 years was for, to understand where, if anywhere, did there need to be some oversight. But I would be very cautious. I hope that our government, our officials are cautious as to how they apply oversight, because I don't think we want to ruin what has been a very good tool for us over the last.
And Mark, also on the money side, right? We want to see that money stay in the authority and focused on what the intent was, which is to continue to expand the network, correct?
Correct. And look, I think most Americans listening to us today have really said, hey, the less government has to do with the money that we're getting taxed a ton of money, so we don't need to add to that. It's not the cost of the taxpayers any money. And I don't want to digress into politics, but we got fraud now that's being uncovered all over this country. And I think that we're now in a really strong position to say, look, the government doesn't need a ton of oversight, especially financially. Let's keep the money going where it's supposed to go, as opposed to opening it up for potential fraud. When I haven't heard of any potential fraud in this particular independent authority. And so it is one of the examples where government actually has worked for the way it's supposed to work. And I would love to see it continue.
Yeah. To your point, there's actually quite a bit of oversight already. I mean, the FCC has oversight. Congress has oversight. The Inspector General at the Department of Commerce has oversight. And if they want to add to that, have at it. They also want to put probably another. I think we're comfortable with that. If they want to take a look at it 10 years from now and see, is there something that needs to be tweaked? We're okay with that, right?
And you know why I'm okay with that, Chuck? Look at where happened. From where you started your career, even in the last 20 years, the technology that has come about, including FirstNet, computers in cars, just the technology and everything that AI now, everything is changing rapidly. So I think a 10-year review of everything doesn't lock us in long term to something that may become antiquated. I don't know.
We don't know
But
that. You're absolutely right.
We don't know that.
We don't
But
know.
what we do know is it's working now. Give us the ability to continue to move forward with it. And as things come up, as things change, as technology improves, which is what you guys are constantly at the front end of, you're constantly looking at the best technology. And I know the FirstNet Authority is as well. And that is what allows us to be so mobile, has been the FirstNet Authority. And when it comes to communications within law enforcement and first responders. So I think I'm okay with the 10-year sunset just because things are changing very rapidly.
Yeah, again, it's another 10-year checkpoint, really, where where they can just say, "Hey, look, how's it going? What do we need to do? How has the technology changed? How does this need to be? What do we need to do? Do we need to just reauthorize, or do we need to add anything?" And again, but my point is keeps going back to two things. Public safety has to maintain its independence and its control over the authority and therefore the contract, and what, because we know what we need, right? And the other thing is, I don't want to see this money getting diverted elsewhere, which unfortunately is just in government anywhere, where that's the federal government, state government. Whenever they see a pot of money, because this thing's been so successful, right, at generating revenue, it's like, look at that pot of gold over there. We can take some of that, and we don't want to see that happen, right?
100%. Government has proven to be very bad stewards of our tax dollars. And these dollars they're coming about, and they're designed to continue to make the communication and the broadband, all the things that we need in law enforcement, first responders, to continue to improve it and to improve it in a timely manner. And I think the best way to do that is to continue with the authority the way it already is.
I agree with you 100%. And again, if they want to let checkpoints, fine. Some more oversight or more visibility into the network and its coverage. I think public safety likes that idea. We'd like to see where it's going. How's the coverage? Is it covering where it should? If it's not, where do we need new sites, right? That kind of thing. So I think, when we look at this, we focus on where we work, all right? And like you said, where you are, it's rural in a lot of area, right? But that doesn't mean there isn't going to be an emergency there. It doesn't mean there isn't going to be a train derailment or God forbid, a plane crash or something like that, where public safety has to coalesce in the hundreds and hundreds around that incident, and they have to be able to share information, right?
That's exactly it. And that's what's been working, and that's what we need to continue with the FirstNet Authority. And so I've been a huge supporter. I mean, we're talking about all the reasons for it. And like I said, one of the issues that I'm hoping that Congress takes this issue up already this year, gets it done, passes a clean continuance of the way the FirstNet Authority is. And then, but if not, I hope to maybe be part of that vote at the beginning of next year. But one way or the other, I would love to see it continue on.
Hey, listen, if I was out there, I'd be voting for you, buddy.
Thank
you know
you.
what I mean?
Thank you.
So one other thing that has been circulating recently is a misimpression that there isn't competition. Now, when we passed this legislation, one of the things we were asked was, well, should we make it mandatory that public safety use it? And we said, first of all, I don't think you could do it, but absolutely not, right? So the other carriers and the major carriers, and then there are local carriers, all of them now have public safety offerings. And our position is, and always has been, in public safety, I would assume you agree, is that competition is good, because it keeps FirstNet on its toes as well, right? So this notion that there isn't competition is not true, right? And the last thing we want is some sort of federal legislation that supposedly creates competition, because we know that never works, right?
Look, we all agree in competition. I think it's what makes every company better when they have to compete with other companies. In this particular case, I would look at it as, let me explain it like this. You have a doorway. How comfortable is it for one person versus three people to try to go through a doorway? It becomes clogged. It jams. People are banging off the door jamb. You know, right now, the way it's working right now is one company, there are a couple of our Johnny come latelys where they had the opportunity to be involved with the FirstNet Authority in the beginning, but so they didn't take it. And now they want to piggyback off of what was already built. And I'm not really okay with that part. I'm all for competition, but you missed your opportunity.
Mark, they're confusing
Right.
it too, right? That like we need in. No, you don't need in. You can compete as you are
Sure.
doing today independently.
Let
Right?
them compete. They missed their opportunity to compete at that point. Now they can compete in different ways. They can come up with different products, different ideas. But in this particular case, I do not want to see a log jam at the front door. What we need is to be able to get through. Somebody gets through the door. And I think that's how we have it right now. And I would like it to keep it that way. And, it'll continue to drive competition. And those other companies will have an opportunity to work on a product that might be better. And maybe down the road, I don't know. But what I see right now is I think that the best opportunity is to continue with it the way it is. And, let one person through the door.
And by design, we didn't want three separate companies in this because while it sounds on its face as a good idea, it's not, because we know in our experience in public safety, when you have multiple companies in a solution, you start to get this when there's a problem, right? It's not us, it's them. It's not workable. Competition is fine, right?
But what you don't want to do is open
and-
the door because you can't figure it out. Open the door for government to come in and try to be the solution to the problem. They won't fix it. They will only make it worse. And so we have a good situation. Let's not screw it up. Let's not government it. Let's keep it the way it is. And it really works right now because state and local first responders, law enforcement and fire, and other first people that are responding to emergencies are the key component to this, and they're the ones that are actually on the board running it, making sound decisions for the product.
Right. I agree. And one of the things we're also looking to ask for is a minimum number of public safety professionals on the board of directors. Look, we had, when I was on it, we had 4, right? And then that has drifted back and forth. When we were startup, we needed commercial folks who understood how to build, network. But now it's up and running. We need to maintain a healthy number of public safety members on that board.
I agree. And I would like to keep it at minimum 4, if not a few more.
No, we're going to ask, Mark. We're going to ask for 5, right? And that's a minimum.
Yeah.
That's a minimum.
Good.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it should be, because that's how you find out if the product's working. If you take that down, you got to have a good cross section of it too. And I think you guys have already done that. But it's good to have a cross section. You got city, you got Florida, you got the West Coast, you got a good indication of
different disciplines, fire, police.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm all for it, man. I'm Chuck. I think what you guys did on the heels of 9/11, a lot of people nowadays maybe weren't alive back then and weren't in New York back then, didn't experience it firsthand. But it also opened our eyes to just the areas, the real blind spots we had in our profession. And that started, I know, the conversation. And then obviously with the loss of life of one of your police officers in New York, it really kind of pushed the urge.
It just triggered a thought process.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we were doing it with detectives, in investigations, and revolutionized that. And we said, why can't we apply this to first response too? Right. And that's where we are today with FirstNet. So, Mark, listen, thanks for doing this today. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. And folks out there, please, we need this reauthorized. We need FirstNet reauthorized and kept going, because it's been a success, and we need to make sure we continue that success.
If you were interested in being part of that PSBTA, that association, you can kind of keep up to speed with what's going on. Anybody in law enforcement, chiefs, sheriffs, I would highly recommend you go be part of that, get the information.
Yeah, the PSBTA.org, right?
I think it's a great organization to be able to understand and be part of how communication looks for first responders. So I appreciate the work that they're doing, the knowledge they put out. And so, yeah, anybody that's listening today can go be part of the PSBTA, sign up, doesn't cost you anything, and stay up to speed with what's going on out there.
Mark, thanks so much for doing this today. I really appreciate
Thank
it,
you,
brother.
Chuck.
All right.
Appreciate it.